I mean, it was so fascinating in so many ways. There was a lot of buildup because Trump was returning to X, Twitter, the first time in years. And then, Elon was hosting it. So you got a double dose of Trump haters, Elon haters, old media hating on new media, a bunch of people saying, is this a campaign donation? It was a friend. And then the European Digital Services Act regulators sent Elon a letter saying, be careful what happens in this conversation because it may violate our hate speech laws. And everyone got dragged. It was just, and then Elon was careful to call it a conversation, not an interview. I guess maybe there's some legal term of art there. The EU regulator was kind of smacked down by the president of the EU for sending a letter that was sort of ridiculous from a free speech standpoint. Like, Elon and a former president are having a conversation. All of a sudden, they're getting pre-warned about what might happen in the conversation. They've been overstepping, but now this was like a slap in the face because it was so easy to explain. Like, who does this? This is insane. This is not Venezuela. This was Europe. This is the EU. It was about 45 minutes late because Elon said there was a denial of service attack on X. And then I listened to it, and there's about 1.5 million people concurrently listening throughout the whole thing. And then page views are near 1 billion right now. So again, hard to say how many of the billion were for what portions. But for me, it was like a holy crap moment. The new media is creating this sort of platform, if you will, that's like, again, further going to eat into traditional media's dominance on interviews, conversations with political candidates, and so on. And then in terms of the content, and people will differ on this depending on which tribe you're part of, but people say, "Oh my gosh, it was a meandering talk," and then you're like, "Wow, he spent 70 minutes riffing, no teleprompter, no previously asked, no prior notice on questions, and it was freewheeling and so on." So when you compare that to the Kamala campaign, which hasn't done any interviews, no press conferences, nothing, zero. And you can see how that's going to become sort of a component of this old media debate because the old media has been supporting her and not pushing her to do these interviews. But now they're like, well, now we don't have you doing interviews and we don't have him doing interviews. What's our purpose? So a lot of stuff that was interesting about it to me.
Well, I got a lot to say about all that. So the denial of service attack is an interesting excuse potentially for his service shitting the bed. Is it a denial of service attack or is it a surge of traffic? I don't know.
Maybe.
The new media versus old media thing, Emil, I don't know how much you know about my background pre-Uber, but I was obsessed with social media disrupting legacy media, this idea of peer-to-peer storytelling, this return to the campfire, unmediated by editorial control, let's say. I helped power real-time social engagement on Washington Post and CNN and Disney and Turner and all this sort of stuff. And a lot of that was powered through developer platforms, which is why I got roped in to do that at Uber. I'm a big believer in social media, new media, having a big disruptive impact on old media and old ways of thinking. Now, a lot of that disruption has been far, far more negative than I had ever hoped.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a bit of an overstatement to think of X or Elon somehow introducing this idea of breaking old media. Like Zuck used to do the Facebook town hall with the candidates a couple of cycles ago, and Twitter had hosted events earlier, and there were even town halls that were like massive, massive productions, which were branded, Facebook and so on. New media has been eating old media's lunch for a long time. I think this is maybe the emergence of a new kind of media in the sense that it's new right-wing media, right? This is the first time that any of these major tech platforms have been right of center rather than left of center. And so I think that's a new phenomenon. But more to the point, I'm not sure who something like this appeals to. Like, if you're in Trump's base, you already believe in what he's saying and what he would say to Musk. And if you're in Musk's base, you already know that he likes Trump and you probably already align with Trump. Isn't the point now to be broadening the tent and trying to bring in the undecideds and the moderates? Strategically, it just feels like a strange step to be taking now in the face of a Kamala and a whatever Walz clearly re-energizing the Democratic side, the left side, and cannibalizing the middle. It feels weird for Trump to be retreating to the base or to the billionaire class. I don't know. It seems a bit strange to me.
Yeah, the billionaires on X, right? I mean,
Yeah.
come on, man.
No, I'm saying
Yeah,
like to the people who buy this narrative, whether you buy it or not, like is Musk and Trump broadening the story for him to get more undecideds back over the fence?
I mean, here's my view, which is on X, it may be that it has become a place that since Musk bought it, that there's more of a narrative that the right can tell where they felt they couldn't tell it except on Fox News. But that doesn't mean the user base. I mean, they're like, if anything, I think Linda Yaccarino, the CEO of X, like released some stat that like, there's more Democrats on the platform than Republicans. I don't know how they tell that, but I don't think it's as non-diverse as you think politically. So if you're Trump,
Sorry to interrupt. I don't mean Twitter is filled with only right. I mean, Musk now as a brand seems to be popular with the right and
yeah,
a similar kind of right that Trump is. And so those two together, whether it's streamed on Twitter or streamed on wherever, what is the point of having a conversation with Elon Musk when you're trying to get the middle is what I'm a bit confused about.
if you think about what the audience for that was, people who like Musk who might be Democrats, remember, like he has a green, he's Mr. Green in terms of his electrification of autos, right? People who are, what do you call it, degrowthers versus growthers, people who are growthers, but maybe left of center in terms of cultural politics. And frankly, again, if you're now in the US, if you watch US network news, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, overwhelmingly it's left. So when you add the six together, so the fact that Trump got a hour and a half means a lot to just like reaching people. It's not a narrow cast. Like if you told me he went on the Christian Broadcasting Network, I'd say, okay, well, he might have that constituency pretty locked up and you might not want to spend a half a day doing that in what's left of 80-day campaign. But when you hit this broad a swath, I think it can't hurt. Unless you don't do well,
Unless you don't do well. Well, that actually brings me to the other point you raised I'd love to talk about, which is when you said what topics were discussed, you kind of actually quickly pivoted to, well, at least it's live and everything Kamala does is scripted or pre-recorded, I guess. But what was it that he said? Again, I haven't seen it, but a lot of what he says, as far as I've seen so far, is based on faulty assumptions, on weird. And I'm not saying weird because that's the Kamala line. Actually, just my own thought is like, it's either a bad assumption, a massive over-exaggeration, or an incorrect prescription, or it is right assumption, right prescription coming from the mouth of an authoritarian who seems like a self-serving grifter. So like, I can't, what's the content of this 1.5 hour conversation?
You've got to remember, there's 1,000 things to talk about. The border, inflation, Ukraine, Israel. I hit all those topics.
And did he have anything that you would describe as, like at Uber, we used to talk about horsepower, right? And we used to talk about truth seeking, and we used to talk about, fast forwarding to the future. And actually, many of the things Trump brings up, as I would describe them, as real problems that liberals and Democrats would like to stick their head in the sand about. But do you see horsepower and truth seeking and fast forwarding to a future in Trump versus exaggeration, misrepresentation, and wanting to go back to the past?
Man, you have full-throatedly like consumed the talking points. Like, holy cow!
That's not bad. No,
I mean,
no one.
okay,
no one
hold
admits
on. No. Yeah,
that.
hold on. Going back to the past of lower inflation, I think most people would say that, like, yes, let's go back to the past on that issue. Going back to the past of fewer people coming over the border, people go like, yes, let's go back to the past on that. Sounds good.
Yes, but that's a good example, right? To go back to fewer people coming over the border. Let's assume for a moment there are too many people coming over the border, which I heard recently that there is actually less than during Trump, but whatever. Let's assume there are too many immigrants. Let's assume they're misusing the asylum laws. Just take that as assumed, even though maybe right or wrong, people will argue with us. But is building a physical wall a representation of a real solution from the future, or is it some reductive slogan from, bygone era?
I mean, there's a lot less talking about the wall, if at all, right now. It's all about the policies, catch and release, remain in Mexico, the speed at which you return people who don't have a valid assignment claim, what you assume to be a valid assignment claim. It's a lot of things. I don't think anyone will pretend that a single wall is all you need to do.
Well, except Trump in last
No,
cycle.
I mean, he talks about remain in Mexico. He talks about catch and release. He talks about
What does remain in Mexico, by the way? Is it? I'm curious about that.
remain in Mexico means if you're coming from a country that's not Mexico to try to cross the U.S. border and you want to apply for asylum, you have to remain in Mexico while you apply for asylum.
Oh,
So
okay.
what it does is it doesn't sort of overwhelm us and then risk that whatever law enforcement agency can't handle you and they just release you into the system. And then it also forces some sample selection bias. So you're only going to go there and wait if you have an asylum claim that you think is valid and provable. So it had all these effects. I mean, when you talk about the border now and Biden being less bad than it was at the peak, yes, because he undid some of the damage he did when he took over the Trump's policies on day one. He issued 96 executive orders undoing some of this stuff. That being said,
I really this particular topic is
hold on.
frustrating to me because Trump undid the bipartisan agreement to fix the border, right?
But no. You can't 3.5 years in.
Why not?
3.5 years in going like, wow, 15 million people came in. We should pass this border thing. And it doesn't pass because it allows 3,000 people a day, 1 million people a day to still come in. It allows a bunch of things. It allows amnesty and things. And say, oh, the guy didn't approve it 3.5 years in. What about the 10 million people who came in the first 3.5 years? Are you not responsible for that?
That's called sunk cost. That's called compromise. It's called politics is the art of getting stuff done, right? Like it was a bipartisan bill that was about to be signed that he said, hey, this is bad for me politically. Please don't sign it.
Look, but bipartisan when it's 51 Democrats and 2 Republicans, none from a border state. None. Look,
is that the actual ratio? Is that the actual ratio?
Yes, look at the vote. You Google it. It was
well, hang on. That's the vote. That's the vote. I'm talking about the authoring and what the vote was set up to be.
There's one guy.
Trump cratered the vote. That's the point I'm making.
Look, I read that. I'm a lawyer, geek. I read the bill. It was a terrible bill. Is it better than all the previous bills I failed? Yes. Was it in and of itself a bad bill? Yes.
Then we're enthusiastically agreed.
but back to what Elon said, he actually raised this issue, which is one of the new things I heard about immigration from Trump yesterday, which was he said, "Are you for legal immigration?" Legal immigration, and he said, "Yes." If they're vetted and they meet the criteria that we have, I am for I am not against legal immigration. And
as long as they're not Muslim, though. As long as they're not Muslim.
No. Elon said, "I'm an immigrant." He's like, remember the ban on certain religious groups coming was in retrospect to stop the sort of Syrian immigration that happened during that term that's now causing problems in Europe.
My favorite thing about Trump supporters, and I love that we're having this conversation, Emil. Thank you for having it with me. They're far more rational, nuanced, clever, and articulate than Trump will ever be, and reasonable. And it's that classic thing of liberals seem to take him literally, but not seriously, and people who support him seem to be taking him seriously, but not literally. If what he believes is what you're describing, in some cases, then I would have less of a problem with him, putting aside, his tendency to call the media the enemy of the people. And
that's very word sell of you, Chris.
What's word selling?
I can resend word selling versus shape rotators. People who do stuff versus word sell who mince on words. The thing is in politics, and the reason why Bill Clinton was so good at politics, or Obama was, or even George W. Bush at politics, was because they were able to encapsulate something.
Yeah.
That more people could consume than the nuanced conversation that happens behind the scenes or in other forums. And that is a political skill to be able to do that.
It's a leadership skill, right?
It's a leadership skill too, but Trump does it in a way where if the policy he implements you'd agree with, you're so angry about the way he says it that not you.
Oh, I see.
The left is so angry about how he says these things, not about how he does them, because they have to go through a policy process. They have to be implemented. So of course there's nuance. There's no build a wall and it's done,
I have a lot more to say about this, but this is not the politics show. It's a startup show. So let's move on to the other Elon news of the week.